Good afternoon. I'm Rob Hendin, the senior political producer for CBS News. I'm joined by Brian Montopoli, a chief political reporter for CBSNews.com. We're going to talk about the president's walk across the street today, Brian. What do you think? He went to the Chamber of Commerce into the Hornet's Nest and spoke for about 35 minutes. What did you take away from his remarks today?
Well, the president's been criticized this year by liberals for sort of giving too much to the business community. Between Bill Daley and the GE CEO, it's really been, I'm willing to work with big business. Now, a lot of people say, you've been doing a lot for big business. There was the TARP bailout. I mean, that was under Bush, but you know, Washington's been doing plenty for big business. We don't need to do any more for big business. So this was sort of seen as another example of the president, seen on the left as another example of the president just sort of giving, you know, too much to big business. Now, the speech he gave, however, I thought was interesting because it wasn't, hey, let's be friends, I'll do whatever you want. I mean, he said you need to accept regulation. Regulation is important. And maybe that's common sense, but you've got the chamber willing to spend a lot of money to kill regulations. And so for him to go in and say, look, guys, you need to accept this, and to say, basically, channeling John F. Kennedy, you need to think about what you can do for your country. You need to do right by your country instead of yourselves. I mean, this was something of a challenge from the president to the business community. Now, does it translate into anything? Hard to say, but he didn't go in there hat in hand and say, hey, I'll do whatever you guys want. He did at least challenge them a little bit.
Yeah, it was interesting that you brought up Kennedy's. It was almost the same line. Don't ask what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? And he said, you know, they have a responsibility. So at the same time, it seems like the president is trying to get the business community to spur innovation, to hire, but to also not fight all the regulations. And he seemed to go in there pretty heavily in defending regulations, especially healthcare. What do you think of him kind of bringing up all the points that business seems to hate against the White House? He went in there and defended.
Well, first of all, I think we should talk to people a little bit about what the chamber is. Now, the chamber is an amalgam of a number of companies. Tom Donahue says the Chamber Federation is 3 million companies, but ultimately it's funded by half of its funding comes from about 45 companies. If you look at 2009, when this healthcare battle was being had, a lot of the money going into the chamber, a lot of the money being spent on ads against the healthcare bill were coming from the healthcare industry. So this is really an organization that represents big business. So when he goes in there and he makes his case to the chamber, he's less making a case, I think, to maybe small business, although certainly that's important and the business community is paying attention to this. This is a speech to big business. And you know, he's just trying to say, look, you guys, this is what we need to do. We needed to address these costs. If we don't address these costs, it's going to be bad for you. They don't believe it. I mean, I think we all know that the healthcare industry didn't like the law, but you know, he had to make the case, and he did.
The regulation thing is also quite interesting because it's on the same day he goes to the chamber, the top watchdog in the House, Darrell Issas, has come out with a list of all these regulations, that 200 letters he got from businesses when he asked what regulations stifle job and growth, and they came up with everything from, you know, how much time pilots have rest between flights to drinking water and EPA. And the president said, you know, some of these regulations are really important. Right. You know, he said seatbelts in cars did not kill the industry. You know, more efficient refrigerators spurn an entire new growth industry. I mean, what do you think of that?
Child labor laws was another thing he brought up. I mean, when one of the best lines in the speech was when Obama said, I think he said it was the ABA president, said that child labor laws were this huge affront. And I think we all agree now that child labor laws were probably a good thing. It's classic Obama, right? He's on the one hand saying, we need regulations. On the other hand, saying, but we want to get rid of all the bad regulations. And granted, I mean, that is the ideal situation, right? But he's doing what Obama loves to do, which is to say, I want this, but we can also sort of work with what you want. He's trying to thread the needle, and that's his whole message. I mean, going back to December, when he sort of rose above and was able to get that tax cut compromise, he's the guy who's saying, I can play both sides, I can rise above, and this is part of that.
It's very interesting that you brought up the regulations, because he had said previously, even in the State of the Union, that we're going to go through the federal government, reorganize, get rid of overlapping regulations, get rid of regulations that are inefficient, that are outdated. But at the same time, they put in place an entire amount of new regulations in healthcare, in the financial industry. So he's kind of wants to have the regulations he wants, but get rid of the ones he doesn't want.
And this goes to this whole, I mean, this just fundamentally goes to the argument between the Democrats and Republicans about big government and small government, right? What is big government? Big government is a whole bunch of regulations. And I think on a very fundamental level, the reason that Republicans want to talk about regulations is because a lot of Americans say, you know, you shouldn't be telling me how to run my business. You shouldn't be regulating greenhouse gases in a way that's going to hurt the coal industry or, you know, hurt my way of life. And Democrats are trying to say, look, we get that. we don't want to do too much, but you have to understand that, you know, global warming is a problem, that these other things are a problem. And this is the fundamental argument. I mean, it sounds when we're talking about regulations like we're getting into something very specific, but we're not. This issue goes at the whole big thing, the whole big debate that they're having. And I think it is hard for the Democrats. I think the Republicans have something of an advantage on this, right? It's always easier to say, we want to get government out of your life. I mean, who doesn't want more autonomy over their lives, going back to when they're, you know, a teenager and their parents won't let them have autonomy. So the Democrats have to say, hey, look, you know, teen, you can stay out late, but you got to come home, you know, at 2 a.m. or whatever. My parents were generous, I think, but you know, that's the argument that they're trying to make, and that's a hard argument to make. So
it was interesting. I thought also the president said to the business community today, think about your business, your bottom line, but also your families. And he was trying to humanize these, you know, business tycoons in a way to think like, okay, the clean water regulation helps your kids have clean water. The food safety regulations make sure they're not going to get sick. So you're right. It is kind of how to be a tough parent or how to just let loose. So
isn't it crazy that, I mean, I have to say that the notion that a president would need to say to people, you should make sure that America has clean water so your families don't get sick, does seem a little bit almost like something he shouldn't need to say, but that's the fight that's being had, right? I think the chamber would say, look, we are okay with some regulations. I mean, the chamber's argument is we accept certain regulations. It's just our baseline and the president's baseline for what is appropriate are very different.
Mm-hmm. It's even interesting, some of the ideas from like Sarah Palin and other conservatives attacking the First Lady for saying we want to have kids eat healthy. There's some people are saying it's a war on Oreos and regulating what you can eat, and it's, you know, that it actually all kind of goes into the same thing. So it's very interesting. So Brian, thank you very much for joining. Thanks for watching.